You've probably walked into a grocery store, stood in front of the meat counter, and seen labels like lean, low-fat, organic, or even free-range. These words are designed to make you feel good about your choices. But what do they really mean? And more importantly, how do they affect your health? The truth is, most of the marketing around meat is built on outdated science and misleading information. For decades, we've been told that red meat is dangerous, chicken is safer, and fish is the pinnacle of dietary virtue. But this narrative has one major flaw. It ignores the source. Let's start with red meat. Beef, bison, lamb. These animals were meant to graze on open fields, eating grass and moving freely. That's how they evolved. When cows eat grass, their bodies produce fats that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, and other beneficial compounds. These fats support brain function, reduce inflammation, and can even help regulate blood sugar levels. But modern industrial farming doesn't care about evolution, it cares about profit margins. So instead of letting cattle roam free, we confine them to crowded feedlots and feed them corn and soy, foods they're not biologically designed to digest. This unnatural diet changes the composition of their fat, increasing inflammatory omega-6s and reducing omega-3s. Suddenly, beef isn't just less healthy, it becomes a contributor to chronic disease. And yet, somehow, it's still red meat that gets the blame. Now let's look at chicken. Chicken breast used to be considered a lean protein powerhouse. People switched from beef to chicken thinking they were making a healthier choice. But here's the catch. Most chicken sold today comes from massive factory farms, where birds are raised in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions. They're fed genetically modified grains high in omega-6 fatty acids, pumped full of antibiotics, and often processed with chemical additives to preserve moisture and enhance appearance. As a result, CAFO-raised chicken has a wildly imbalanced omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, sometimes as high as 20:1 or worse. Compare that to pastured chicken, which can have a ratio closer to 5.1 or even better. The difference between these two types of chicken is night and day, not just for flavor, but for your body's long-term health. Then there's pork. Like beef and chicken, pigs raised in confinement operations are fed an unnatural diet of corn and soy, leading to similar imbalances in their fat composition. Pigs are also often given growth hormones and antibiotics to speed up weight gain and prevent disease outbreaks in crowded barns. Again, none of these practices benefit the consumer. They benefit the bottom line of industrial agriculture. Salmon, often touted as the ultimate heart-healthy food, isn't immune to these problems either. Wild-caught salmon swim thousands of miles in cold waters, feeding on nutrient-rich prey. Their flesh is deep orange because of astaxanthin, a powerful antioxidant that protects their muscles and ours. But farmed salmon live in cramped net pens, often filled with parasites and waste. They're fed artificial diets supplemented with synthetic astaxanthin, which doesn't offer the same benefits, and are prone to disease, requiring heavy doses of antibiotics. And while wild salmon contain high levels of anti-inflammatory omega-3s, farmed salmon often contain higher concentrations of environmental toxins like PCBs and dioxins. Plus, due to their unnatural diets, their omega-3 content can be significantly lower than their wild counterparts. So what does all this mean? It means that when we talk about whether meat is good or bad for us, we're asking the wrong question. The real question should be, where did this meat come from and how was it raised? Because if we strip away the labels and the marketing hype, we see a simple truth. Naturally raised, pasture-fed animal proteins are deeply nourishing. They provide complete amino acid profiles, essential vitamins and minerals, and healthy fats that our bodies need to thrive. On the flip side, industrially produced meats, whether it's beef, chicken, pork, or even farmed fish, are metabolically damaging. They contribute to inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance, the very conditions that lead to obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. And yet, mainstream nutrition advice continues to ignore this reality. We're still being told to limit red meat, Avoid saturated fat and eat more chicken and fish. But if the chicken and fish we're eating are raised in poor conditions, then we're simply trading one problem for another. This is why it's so important to understand the difference between clean meat and industrial meat. Because the kind of meat you eat, and where it comes from, has a direct impact on your health. Healthier Life emphasizes that the quality of your food sources matters more than any label or marketing claim. Fat isn't inherently bad. Red meat isn't inherently dangerous. What matters is how the food is raised, handled, and consumed. The fat truth: what your body really needs from meat. When it comes to meat, one of the biggest misunderstandings revolves around fat. For years, we've been told to fear fat, especially saturated fat. Health authorities have pushed low-fat diets, urging people to trim the fat off their steaks, remove the skin from chicken breasts, and opt for lean cuts whenever possible. But this obsession with low-fat meat misses the point entirely. Fat is not the enemy. In fact, it's one of the most vital components of a healthy diet, especially when it comes from natural sources. Let's take a closer look at the different kinds of fats found in various meats and why they matter. First, monounsaturated fats. These are the fats found in olive oil, avocados, and nuts, and they're widely praised for their heart-healthy benefits. But here's something most people don't realize. Beef contains more monounsaturated fat than any other type of meat. Yes, beef. About half of the fat in a typical cut of grass-fed beef is monounsaturated fat, specifically oleic acid, the same type found in extra virgin olive oil. Pork follows closely behind with slightly less monounsaturated fat, but still a significant amount. Pastured chicken has a moderate amount, while CAFO-raised chicken tends to have less. Salmon, surprisingly, has the least amount of monounsaturated fat among the commonly consumed meats, though its omega-3 content more than makes up for it. Next, saturated fat. Long demonized as a cause of heart disease, saturated fat has taken a beating over the years. But recent research shows that saturated fat, especially from whole foods like meat and dairy, isn't inherently harmful. In fact, it plays a crucial role in hormone production, brain function, and cell membrane integrity. Grass-fed beef contains a balanced mix of saturated fats, including stearic acid, a type of saturated fat that actually lowers LDL cholesterol in many people. Pork has a similar profile, while chicken has slightly less. Farmed fish, however, can have higher levels of saturated fat depending on their diet, though this is often overshadowed by their omega-3 content. Now, polyunsaturated fats, specifically omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids, are where things get complicated. Omega-6 fats are essential, meaning we need them in our diets, but only in balance with omega-3s. Our ancestors ate a ratio of about 1.1 to 4.1 omega-6 to omega-3. Today, the average Westerner consumes a ratio closer to 15.1 or even 20.1. Largely due to industrial seed oils, processed foods, and factory-farmed meats. Grass-fed beef has a near-perfect omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, usually around 2.1 to 4.1. Pastured pork and chicken are slightly higher in omega-6s but still relatively balanced. However, CAFO-raised meats tell a very different story. Feedlot beef can have ratios as high as 21. CAFO pork and chicken often reach 15.1 or worse. Farmed salmon, despite its reputation as an omega-3 powerhouse, can have a skewed ratio too, depending on what it's fed. Many farmed fish receive diets high in soy and corn-based feeds, which increases their omega-6 content and reduces their omega-3s compared to wild salmon. Wild-caught salmon, on the other hand, remains one of the best sources of omega-3s available. Its ratio is typically around 1.4 omega-6 to omega-3, an ideal range for reducing inflammation and supporting brain and heart health. So what does this mean for your health? If you're eating conventionally raised meats, beef, pork, chicken, or farmed fish, you're likely consuming large amounts of pro-inflammatory omega-6 fats without enough omega-3s to balance them out. Over time, this imbalance can lead to chronic inflammation, which is linked to nearly every modern disease, from arthritis and autoimmune disorders to heart disease and cancer. But if you switch to naturally raised meats, grass-fed beef, pastured pork and chicken, and wild-caught fish, you shift the balance in your favor. These meats provide the right kinds of fats in the right proportions, fats that support cellular health, reduce inflammation, and keep your metabolism running smoothly. And don't forget about cholesterol. For decades, we were told that high cholesterol in meat, especially in red meat, was dangerous. But cholesterol itself isn't bad. In fact, it's essential. Your body uses cholesterol to build cell membranes, synthesize hormones, and protect nerve cells. Beef, pork, chicken, and salmon all contain roughly the same amount of cholesterol per serving. There's no meaningful difference between them. Yet for some reason, red meat gets singled out as the culprit. What matters more than cholesterol content is what else is in your diet and how your body processes cholesterol. Saturated fat from natural sources doesn't raise harmful LDL cholesterol in most people. In fact, it often raises HDL, the good cholesterol, and improves overall lipid profiles. The real danger lies in ultra-processed meats loaded with refined vegetable oils, preservatives, and additives. These products spike insulin levels, damage gut health, and promote metabolic dysfunction, all of which are far more dangerous than eating a well-marbled steak from a grass-fed cow. So, the takeaway is clear: fat is not the enemy. The quality of the meat and the life the animal lived is what determines whether that fat supports your health or harms it. Healthier Life emphasizes that the nutritional value of meat goes beyond just protein content. The fats in clean, pasture-raised meat are rich in nutrients and beneficial compounds that support long-term health, mental clarity, and physical performance. TMAO and heart health, separating fact from fear. For years, red meat has been under fire for supposedly increasing the risk of heart disease. One of the most commonly cited culprits is a compound called TMAO, or trimethylamine N-oxide. You've probably seen headlines claiming that eating red meat raises TMAO levels in the blood, which in turn increases your chances of having a heart attack or stroke. But here's what they don't tell you. The real story behind TMAO is far more nuanced and far less damning for red meat. Let's break it down. TMAO is produced when certain gut bacteria metabolize compounds like L-carnitine and choline, which are found in animal proteins, especially red meat. These compounds are converted into TMA, trimethylamine, by gut microbes, and then the liver converts TMA into TMAO. Studies have shown that high levels of TMAO are associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. But correlation does not equal causation. And this is where things get interesting. First, TMAO is not unique to red meat. In fact, fish contains the highest natural levels of TMAO, sometimes up to 50 times more than beef. Yet no one is telling people to stop eating salmon or tuna. Why the double standard? Because context matters. TMAO levels rise primarily due to poor gut health, insulin resistance, and metabolic dysfunction, not because eating red meat is inherently dangerous. In healthy individuals, consuming red meat does not significantly raise TMAO levels. It's the state of your gut microbiome and metabolic health that determines how your body processes these compounds. Think of it like this: if your gut flora is out of balance, if you have dysbiosis, leaky gut, or an overgrowth of harmful bacteria, then eating foods rich in L-carnitine and choline might indeed lead to elevated TMAO. But that's a sign of underlying health problems, not proof that red meat is bad for everyone. Also, many of the early studies linking TMAO to heart disease were funded by groups with vested interests in promoting plant-based diets or alternative protein sources. That doesn't mean their findings are entirely false, but it does suggest we should interpret them with a critical eye. Another important point: L-carnitine and choline are vital nutrients. L-carnitine helps transport fatty acids into your mitochondria so they can be burned for energy. It's especially important for muscle function, brain health, and male fertility. Choline is essential for liver function, nerve signaling, and brain development. Deficiencies in choline have been linked to fatty liver disease, cognitive decline, and even neurological disorders. Red meat, particularly organ meats like liver, is one of the best dietary sources of choline. So cutting it out completely could leave you deficient in nutrients that are crucial for long-term health. And here's another twist. Some research suggests that high TMAO levels may actually be protective in certain contexts, such as kidney function and cellular hydration under stress. The science is still evolving, and we're only beginning to understand the full role of TMAO in the body. Now, let's go back to the idea that red meat causes heart disease. For decades, we've been told to avoid saturated fat and cholesterol because they supposedly clog arteries. But recent large-scale meta-analyses have failed to find a clear link between saturated fat consumption and heart disease. Instead, new evidence points to other culprits: refined carbohydrates, excessive sugar, industrial seed oils high in omega-6 fats, chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, gut dysbiosis. These factors are far more predictive of heart disease than moderate consumption of clean, naturally raised red meat. In fact, populations that consume high amounts of red meat, like the Maasai in Africa or the Inuit in the Arctic, have historically had very low rates of heart disease. What changed? Their shift toward processed foods, refined grains, and industrial vegetable oils. So, if you're eating grass-fed beef, pastured pork, or free-range poultry, and your overall diet supports metabolic health, plenty of fiber, whole foods, healthy fats, and minimal processed ingredients, there's no reason to fear red meat. On the other hand, if you're eating processed deli meats, fast food burgers, or frozen chicken nuggets loaded with additives, you're not just getting meat, you're consuming a cocktail of preservatives, refined starches, and inflammatory vegetable oils that do contribute to heart disease. The key takeaway? TMAO is not a reason to fear red meat. It's a marker of poor metabolic and gut health. If your levels are high, it's time to look at your overall diet, gut health, and lifestyle, not just cut out steak. Healthier life encourages a balanced approach. Eat clean, nutrient-dense meats from trusted sources, support your gut microbiome with fermented foods and fiber, and reduce reliance on processed junk food. That's how you protect your heart without sacrificing flavor or nutrition. Conclusion: the truth about meat. It's not what you eat, but how it was eaten. By now, one thing should be crystal clear: meat itself is not the enemy. The real issue lies in how our meat is produced, processed, and consumed in the modern world. For decades, we've been misled into believing that red meat is inherently unhealthy, that chicken is a safer alternative, and that fish is always the best option. But when we look at the science, especially the fats, nutrients, and metabolic effects of different meats, it becomes obvious that these assumptions are outdated and often flat out wrong. The problem isn't beef or pork or even saturated fat. It's industrial farming, where animals are raised in crowded, unnatural conditions, fed grain-based diets, and pumped full of antibiotics and hormones. These practices don't just harm animal welfare. They fundamentally alter the nutritional profile of the meat we eat, turning what could be nourishing food into a source of inflammation, oxidative stress, and chronic disease. Grass-fed beef, pastured pork, free-range poultry, and wild-caught fish are worlds apart from their factory-farmed counterparts. These meats contain balanced omega fatty acid ratios, higher levels of anti-inflammatory compounds like CLA, and richer nutrient profiles including iron, zinc, B vitamins, and antioxidants. They support brain function, heart health, immune strength, and long-term metabolic wellness. Even concerns about cholesterol and TMAO fall apart under scrutiny. Cholesterol is essential, not evil, and the type of meat you eat has little bearing on whether it harms your health. As for TMAO, it's more of a biomarker for poor gut and metabolic health than a direct cause of heart disease. In fact, fish contains far more TMAO than red meat, yet no one is banning salmon. What this all boils down to is quality over fear. We've spent too long avoiding entire food groups based on flawed or incomplete science. Instead, we should be asking better questions. Where did this meat come from? How was the animal raised? What did it eat? How was it processed? Because those factors determine whether meat supports your health or slowly undermines it. Healthier life doesn't mean cutting out meat. It means choosing clean, ethically raised proteins that align with your body's natural needs. It means understanding that food is more than calories. It's information, fuel, and medicine. And it means rejecting industrialized, chemically altered substitutes masquerading as healthy options. So next time you're at the grocery store or reading a nutrition headline, remember this. Not all meat is created equal. Choose wisely, eat naturally, live healthier. Your body will thank you.